Bessel invited me to speak this evening. He said, why don't you start off by talking about the dreams of the internet pioneers, the early internet sort of utopia, vision of utopia, which doesn't half make you feel old. But it really wasn't that long ago, the Declaration of the Independence of Cyberspace, 1996. And it gets you thinking, really, in that document, there's not very much to say about privacy. Those people, that time, was all concerned about freedom to do things, and not freedom from the sorts of invasive surveillance that we've been discussing this evening. For all John Perry Barlow's talk of statelessness, when you look at him and people like John Gilmore, the founder of the Electronic Frontier Foundation, Eric S. Raymond, notorious gun rights advocate and author of The Cathedral and the Bazaar, there's a lot of US centrism in that way of thinking. Eric S. Raymond talked about homesteading the new sphere. John Gilmore and John Perry Barlow and Richard Kapoor founded the Electronic Frontier Foundation and talked about the Electronic Frontier. And as we know, the internet has its own Declaration of Independence. And so we shouldn't be that surprised when, well, it is quite a long time now, 15 years, 17 years down the line, it turns out that privacy isn't that well protected online, because in the US itself, where it has very strong free expression norms, particularly when it comes to corporations, there aren't strong privacy protections like the data protection regulations, which are stronger in Europe. Anyway, 3 years after the Declaration of Independence of Cyberspace was written, Lawrence Lessig came up with a counter-argument about the regulation of the internet. Barlow had argued that wasn't possible. He said, yes, it is, and it's regulated in 4 ways. The law regulates technology, markets will regulate it, norms, and code itself. In fact, probably you all know this, it was called Code and Other Laws of Cyberspace. It was the 1999 book that Lessig wrote this in. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about how each of those different regulatory pressures kind of acted, again, in a way such that we shouldn't be surprised that we are where we are today. Originally I wanted to disregard norms, because I thought we wouldn't all be in a room thinking about mass surveillance unless it somehow insulted some of our deeply held beliefs about privacy. That's why we're here, because our norms don't seem to tally with what's happening. But at the same time, I'm also interested in what we really think is bad about this, as lay people, not as lawyers or as journalists or researchers or academics of any other kind. But how does it make us feel? Interestingly, I would love to know what James thought about this. I'm really fascinated by the fact that the pictures used to illustrate the stories of mass surveillance are really bland. They're of the door in AT&T, behind which are the wires, which the wiretapping, or they're of GCHQ or the Pentagon. We can't seem to get beyond the fact that this is happening in a place. But what, articulating mass surveillance and the fear that it engenders among us is actually quite hard, particularly visually. It's lucky there's no really great visual slide behind me as I make that claim. So there we go. So let's disregard norms, or let's talk about norms, later when we get to talking. Let's talk about architecture first. Should we be surprised that we're in a situation where the types of the eye-watering levels of surveillance that we now know are going on, when data is really the pollution of the information age? Everything we do that's mediated by computers leaves data vapor, which can then, which may, and as it turns out does, exist somewhere for later interrogation. The other sort of code or architecture point I'd make here is that although in the 90s, the early 2000s, we might have all been running our own servers, and I know some of us still are, most of us are using Google. Are you using Google right now? Most of us are using Google. It's a client-server world here, and our data is not our own in that sense. Yeah, my notebook thinks of all handbags. That's great. Markets, less second regulatory pressure. What we can observe here is that the business models of the large corporations that are handling our data for us now in this client-server world are exactly the same as the business model of the NSA and GCHQ at this point. It's to collect as much data about us as possible, to interrogate and exploit for different purposes, but nonetheless, these guys, they speak each other's language. And then we've heard a lot already about Lessig's third and the final of his pressures that I'm going to discuss, and that's the law. What I just observe is that because privacy and fundamental rights to privacy have these national security write-outs, coupled with the fact that in the age of the war on terror we're all potentially implicated, this is asymmetric warfare that these agencies are dealing with now, means those protections enshrined in human rights legislation are really not great when it comes to surveillance. So which of those three could we turn around? Let's take code first. I hope James would agree that despite the detailed revelations that they've made about the state of encryption, encryption is still a viable option if deployed in a way that avoids these tools that have had their backdoors written into them. And I know Bruce Schneier, who's been working with you guys, has said that there's still a way to do encryption that is going to be at least better than not encrypting.
I would estimate even 80-90% of people in this room can do the endpoint security, even though you've got to keep your whole computer safe at each end, as well as not doing the protocols done, as well as.
Beware the key loggers and all of that. The other architectural point, and there are projects going on, and there have been since before these revelations, but they're getting more excited now, is to persuade people and make products that go back to a more peer-to-peer architecture. The one that comes to mind is the Free Software Foundation's Freedom Box, but there are also a bunch of researchers at Cambridge University that are trying to make little boxes that you can have in your house that keep your data there. So this is all to the good. In terms of markets, and this is on from that, privacy-friendly products, they're sort of anti-Google. I mean, DuckDuckGo, for example, have had some rather lovely boosts to their traffic following these revelations. However, revelations about LavaBit, apparently Snowden's own email provider, and the fact that a guy who was providing secure private email to people had 10 years' worth of building a business written off by interference from the NSA, they place a question mark over whether people really can make viable privacy-respecting businesses without eventually getting a knock on the door from the men in black. 2 minutes. Okay, I'm going to rush through. Law, again, people are making some progress here. There's been a civil society statement asking at the UN for a rethinking of human rights legislation such that national security guidelines, national security endeavours can fall under its purview. And then, of course, we've got Brazil and we've got Germany talking at least about passing national laws that will keep data within their borders. Now, that brings us on to the penultimate thing I want to talk about, which is the idea that this might split the net into little pieces and undermine some of the dreams of the early pioneers of a global network that had no boundaries and that, flooded the world with the ability to express itself free from state intervention. As we can see, those dreams are slightly in tatters anyway. The other problem with a splinter net, if it were, and it could be implemented, it would be hard, is that companies couldn't really bring to a global market information products anymore. If Twitter happened after Brazil, Germany, India, France, maybe Europe, maybe the entire Schengen area, passed these sorts of laws, it couldn't have reached the market that it reached sort of 5 years ago. But then, do we care? Is that a trade-off we're willing to make? I mean, already it feels like that market is dominated by giants. Maybe that time of rapid innovation has gone. So I wrote this talk, and then I was coming down on the train, and I read an article that I'd actually employed Waterbury. This is the last thing I'm going to say. It's by Becky and it's in the Technology Review this week, MIT Tech Review this week, and that's really good. And it basically says that all of this doesn't matter a jot. We shouldn't worry about privacy. I mean, by Becky we say that. We shouldn't worry about privacy. We don't need to think about these things in terms of the internet and what's happened to our beloved world that John Perry Barlow loved so much in 1996, our beloved cyberspace. Because really what we need to worry about is democracy and the effect that the end game of all of this massive and all of this data gathering has, which is a kind of algorithmic regulation, a kind of regulation of human affairs, not just in national security terms, but in social affairs, where it's all algorithms crunching over large sets of data, algorithms that we can't actually open up and say, well, why was this decision made about me? And who do I talk to get this changed? And how can we tweak the boundaries so that it doesn't happen again? Because nobody knows how it works, and it's just a trust that the machines can crunch the data and that will give us something that's right, not politically right, but right according to what the data shows us. And I would really commend that article to all of you as a way of thinking about what this all means and getting beyond those pictures of doors and buildings. Okay, that's it.